I still remember the way my hands trembled, not from heartbreak, but from disbelief. One moment, I was finalizing the seating chart, the next, my entire future was erased with a single phone call. My mother's voice was cold, almost rehearsed, when she said, "The wedding's off. You'll thank me later." Then, the line went dead. The venue, the deposit, the contracts, all gone overnight. That's when it hit me, this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a setup. My heart dropped as I asked her to email me the form. When I opened it, I saw my name, written in a shaky imitation of my handwriting. My mother's handwriting. I felt my stomach twist. That night, I drove straight to my parents' house. I didn't even knock. I just walked in and held the paper in front of her. "What is this?" I asked. She didn't even flinch. "Oh, that," she said, folding laundry like nothing had happened. "I canceled the venue. It was far too expensive for something that probably won't last." "Mom, that's not your decision to make," I shouted. She looked up, eyes sharp and cold. "It absolutely is when the family name and money are involved." Then she turned back to her clothes. "That's how my family works. Calm cruelty. Passive control wrapped in politeness." When I told my father, he sighed and said, "You know how your mother is. Just let her handle things. You don't want to make this messy." Rachel, my sister, called me dramatic and told me to be grateful someone cares enough to protect you from yourself. I didn't understand what they were protecting me from until I started checking my accounts. The joint wedding fund Daniel and I had created was almost empty. Nearly $40,000 gone. When I called the bank, they told me it had been transferred to a family account, under my mother's authorization as a cosigner. A cosigner I didn't even know existed. And then there was the trust fund. The one Grandpa Cole left for me. I called the attorney who managed it, Mr. Hayes, to ask about accessing it after my wedding was postponed. He hesitated. "Madeline, your parents already requested an early withdrawal due to financial emergencies. They provided documentation, medical bills, debts. I assumed you were aware." I wasn't. The trust fund, $250,000, was gone. Used to rescue my father's failing real estate business and help Rachel pay off her student loans. I remember sitting there, on the cold tile floor of my kitchen, staring at my phone, realizing my entire future had been stolen by the people I called family. The betrayal wasn't new, it was a pattern I'd been too blind to see. When I got accepted to college, they told me, "It's too far. Stay close, be practical." When I got promoted, my mother said, "Don't brag. You'll make Rachel feel bad." When I bought my first car, my dad said, "You should thank your mother for teaching you responsibility." Every milestone I achieved was either dismissed or quietly claimed as theirs. And yet, I kept giving. I paid part of Rachel's tuition. I lent my parents money when their investments failed. I even helped pay off their credit cards once because family sticks together. But now, as I sat in that kitchen, surrounded by canceled wedding invitations and broken trust, I realized, family doesn't steal your happiness and call it love. Daniel found me there, hours later. I told him everything. He wanted to go to the police immediately, but I stopped him. "Not yet," I said. "I need to understand exactly how deep this goes." For the next few weeks, I dug into every document, every email, every transfer. The more I found, the worse it got. My mother had been intercepting mail from the bank for years. My father had been signing off on false financial statements. Even Rachel had used my social security number once to apply for a credit card. It wasn't just betrayal, it was identity theft, emotional manipulation, and years of deceit, all disguised as family concern. And yet, when I confronted them again, they acted like I was the problem. My mother sighed and said, "Madeline, you've always been too emotional. This is why we can't trust you with money." Rachel laughed and said, "Honestly, you should thank us. You were about to ruin your life with that teacher." That's when something inside me snapped. I stopped arguing. I stopped defending myself. I just looked at them and said quietly, "Thank you for showing me exactly who you are." They smiled, thinking they'd won. But that night, I started writing everything down, every transaction, every fake signature, every lie. Because I knew this wasn't over. They thought they'd buried me under their control. But they had just handed me the shovel I needed to dig myself out, and bury their lies instead. I sat there in my car for nearly an hour, my breath fogging up the windshield as the reality sank in. My parents hadn't just interfered in my life, they'd dismantled it piece by piece. My future, my savings, my wedding, all gone under the pretense of protecting me. By the time I walked back into their house the next morning, the anger had settled into something colder, calculated. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I just placed a printed statement from the trust account on the kitchen counter. "You took $247,000, I said quietly. My father didn't even look up from his tablet. "We borrowed it, Madeline. The market's been rough lately. Once things stabilize, we'll return it." "You forged my signature. You lied to the bank. You stole my money," I replied. My voice barely rose, but the calmness made both of them pause. Mom sighed, swirling her wine like this was all a tedious conversation she'd already won. "It's family money, sweetheart. Your grandfather left it to help the family. Rachel needed a lifeline. We needed breathing room. You'll have plenty of chances to rebuild." Rachel appeared from the hallway, hair perfectly done, makeup flawless even at 8 a.m. "God, Maddie, you're being so dramatic. You don't even need that much money. You and Daniel can live off his teacher's salary, right? Isn't that what you wanted? A simple life?" Her tone was dripping with mockery. I stared at her bracelet again, Cartier. The exact model she used to beg Mom to buy her when she finally got her big break. Now I knew where it came from. "You used my trust fund for this?" I asked. Rachel shrugged. "I deserved something nice after all the stress I've been through. You wouldn't understand." That was it. The shift happened inside me right then. Something broke, but not in a way they expected. I realized there was no reasoning with people who'd already decided my pain was an acceptable price for their comfort. So I changed tactics. "Okay," I said softly. "If this is what family means to you, I understand." Mom smiled faintly, mistaking my composure for surrender. "Good. Finally, you're being mature about this." I left without another word. But as I walked out the door, I heard my father mutter, "She'll come around. She always does." They didn't know I was already done coming around. That night, I called Mr. Hayes, the attorney who managed the trust. I told him everything, every forged document, every unauthorized transfer. At first, he tried to stay neutral, but when I sent him copies of the bank statements and cancellation forms, his tone shifted. "Madeline, these aren't just unethical. They're criminal." "I know," I said. "But I'm not pressing charges, yet. I just need proof. Can you help me get everything documented properly?" He agreed. Within a few days, he sent over a full record of the fraudulent activity, forged signatures, false affidavits, and correspondence showing my parents and Rachel had colluded to reallocate the trust. Still, I wasn't ready to confront them again, not until I had backup. That backup came from an unexpected place. Daniel, quiet and steady as always, had a friend named Claire who worked in compliance for a regional bank. She helped us trace the money through multiple transfers, some to my father's business, and a significant portion directly to Rachel's account. When I saw Rachel's name on that final transfer line, I printed it out and stared at it for a long time. Then I called Mom. "Can you all be home tonight? I need to talk to you," I said, voice steady. She hesitated but agreed. Maybe she thought I was coming to apologize. Maybe she thought she'd finally won. That evening, I arrived carrying a small stack of papers and an envelope. Mom opened the door wearing pearls and an expression halfway between irritation and curiosity. We gathered in the living room, same wine glasses, same casual disdain. I placed the documents on the coffee table. "Before I say anything, I want you to read this." Mom glanced down at the papers and waved dismissively. "I don't have time for your tantrums, Madeline." Dad frowned as he scanned the first page. His face went pale. "Where did you get these?" "The attorney," I said. "And a banker named Claire. Turns out fraud leaves a trail. You used my trust fund to pay off business debts and Rachel's student loans. You also forged my signature on the Ivy Hall cancellation. I have evidence of all of it." Mom's composure cracked for the first time. "You don't understand the consequences of what you're saying." "Oh, I understand perfectly," I said. "And so will the judge." Rachel stood up, voice shaking with rage. "You wouldn't dare. You'd destroy this family." I looked her dead in the eye. "You already did." The room went silent. For the first time, none of them had a clever retort. Finally, Mom said in a trembling whisper, "You're not really going to take your own parents to court, are you?" I smiled, small, calm, final. "No, Mom. I'm going to take thieves to court. The fact that they happen to be my parents? That's just tragic coincidence." And then I walked out, leaving them staring at the evidence of their own greed. That was the last night I ever called that house home. The next morning Daniel found me still on the kitchen floor, the papers fanned out like a messy proof of betrayal. He didn't point fingers or tell me I should have known. He sat down, folded his knees beside me, and with the calm I'd grown to love, asked, "So, what's the plan?" That question jolted something loose. Not anger, not panic, clarity. I realized then that my reaction mattered more than theirs. If I wanted justice, I had to move like someone who believed she deserved it. We started by getting professional help. Ava Mitchell was nothing like the lawyers you see on TV. She was sharp, practical, and had a way of cutting through emotion to find the exact piece of paper that proved a crime. When I told her the story, she didn't flinch. Instead, she leaned forward, pulled out a legal pad, and said, "Show me everything." Over the next week we assembled a build of things I'd been too softened to notice, a string of emails from my mother requesting urgent withdrawals, copies of official forms with signatures that trembled the wrong way, bank transfers that had been routed through shell accounts and then funneled to Rachel. We tracked deposits into Rachel's account and payments to my father's failing LLC. Ava taught me how to read the fine print banks hide behind friendly customer service. Daniel reached out to his friend Claire in bank compliance. Claire didn't just check numbers. She walked us through how a withdrawal appears in the eyes of an investigator. She helped us subpoena records and flagged a dozen inconsistencies the bank hadn't noticed because the paper trail had been cleverly laundered through family accounts. Claire's tone over the phone was equal parts rage and meticulous calm. "They made it look like assistance," she said, "but assistance looks different on paper. This is theft." I remember the moment clarity truly arrived. We had a voice memo where my mother, with her voice soft like honey, told Rachel, "Don't worry, darling. Maddie never fights back." Hearing her say it was like finding a match in an otherwise dark room. She had told them she could control me. That single line changed everything. It showed intent. It showed a plan. It showed contempt. Still, putting the pieces together did not make me feel triumphant. It made me steady. I stopped rehearsing the emotional scenes in my head where I begged or pleaded. Those scenes were their fantasy. Instead, I began rehearsing facts, dates, chain of custody. I learned how to explain the transfers in plain language so a judge wouldn't need a degree in finance to see what had happened. Ava told me to be careful about the narrative. People want drama, but in court they want clarity. Keep emotion for the moment you need it. Be precise, be disciplined. We built a timeline that started with Grandpa's will and ended with Rachel's bracelet purchase, each transaction linked to a phone call, each signature matched to handwriting samples. We even had a note where Dad had approved a loan for business stability the day after the cancellation form appeared. As we filed requests and prepared affidavits, something else shifted. Friends came forward, quiet neighbors, an aunt who'd noticed my mother collecting my mail, a former bank teller who remembered a suspicious withdrawal. Nobody wanted to be in the middle of a family fight, but once they saw the evidence, they wanted the truth to be known. Standing in Ava's office with that stack of documents felt like holding a sword and a shield at once. I wasn't naive anymore. I wasn't the obedient daughter who would walk away and let them keep calling it care. I was someone who had been hurt badly, and who was now determined to turn that hurt into something that could not be ignored. I looked at Daniel and Claire and Ava, and for the first time in a long time, I felt supported not because of blood, but because of truth. 2 months later, I filed a civil lawsuit against my parents for fraud, forgery, and misappropriation of funds. I remember the day the papers were served. My father's face went pale when the courier handed him the envelope. My mother, ever the performer, tried to keep her composure, clutching her pearl necklace like it could hold her dignity together. The silence that followed wasn't shock, it was fear. They had never believed I'd have the courage to go through with it. The first call came from Rachel. Her voice was sharp, trembling with anger. "You can't sue Mom and Dad, Maddie. They did everything for you." I let her words hang in the air, then said calmly, "Watch me." After that, she went quiet. The next call came from Mom, her tone syrupy sweet like old poison. "Madeline, you're overreacting, sweetheart. Family doesn't take family to court." I replied, "Then family shouldn't forge signatures and steal $247,000. She hung up without another word. The courtroom was colder than I imagined. When we walked in, my mother was dressed in white. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. She had chosen the color of purity, the color of innocence, like she could manipulate optics the same way she manipulated people. My father sat beside her, stone-faced, while Rachel scrolled through her phone, avoiding my gaze. The bailiff called the case. Cole versus Cole. I took my seat beside Ava and Daniel. My heart pounded, but not from fear, from clarity. I wasn't the scared daughter anymore. I was the plaintiff. Mom went first. She began her performance with practiced grief. "My daughter has emotional instability," she said, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue that stayed perfectly dry. "She's under stress from her failed engagement and has constructed this story as a way to cope." I glanced at the judge, who remained neutral, until Ava stood up. "Your Honor," she said smoothly, "before we proceed, I'd like to play an audio recording for context." She pressed play. "Don't worry, darling. Maddie won't do anything. She never does." My mother's voice filled the courtroom. The silence that followed was electric. Even the court stenographer froze. Mom's hand twitched. Dad shifted uncomfortably. Rachel's face drained of color. Ava let the moment hang, then continued. We have documentation showing that 2 days after this recording was made, the defendants withdrew $247,000 from Ms. Cole's trust fund, without authorization. We'll also show that the wedding venue deposit, initially paid by Ms. Cole, was refunded to an account under Victoria Cole's name. Then came the documents, the forged cancellation form, side-by-side handwriting comparisons, timestamps, digital signatures, and the wire to Rachel's account marked wedding fund reallocation. My mother tried to stay calm. We were helping our other daughter's business, she insisted. Rachel's startup was failing, we intended to repay it. The judge raised a hand. His voice was firm, unimpressed. You meant no harm when you stole $247,000 and forged your daughter's name? That line echoed through the courtroom like a verdict before the verdict. You could have heard a pin drop. The defense's argument unraveled quickly after that. The evidence was airtight. The recordings, the paper trail, the intent, all of it painted one clear picture. My parents hadn't made a mistake. They'd made a choice. When the judge read the ruling, I didn't even breathe. The court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Ms. Madeline Cole. The defendants, Victoria and Thomas Cole, are ordered to repay $247,000 plus interest and damages for emotional distress and forgery. Additionally, restitution of the trust fund shall be restored in full. Mom gasped. Rachel muttered something under her breath. My father just sat there, defeated. As the gavel struck, I felt something release inside me. Not triumph. Not even revenge. Just peace. I didn't look at them as we left the courtroom. There was nothing left to say. The people who had raised me had stolen from me, lied to me, and underestimated me, and now, the truth had done what I never could, made them silent. Outside, the air felt different. Lighter somehow. The courthouse steps gleamed in the afternoon sun. Daniel reached for my hand, and for the first time in months, I let myself exhale. This isn't the end, I whispered. He smiled. No. It's the beginning. And it was. Because that day, I didn't just win a case. I reclaimed my name. Months later, Daniel and I stood beneath the same ivy-covered archway where my mother had once canceled everything. Ivy Hall. The venue manager recognized me instantly, her eyes soft with quiet understanding. You came back, she said. Yes, I smiled. But this time, it's on my terms. There were no guests in gowns, no champagne fountains, no speeches rehearsed to impress anyone. Just Daniel, a few close friends, the sound of rain tapping softly against the glass windows, and peace. When I walked down that aisle, I didn't think about what my parents stole. I thought about what I'd reclaimed, my voice, my worth, and my future. After the ceremony, I did something I'd dreamed about for months. I changed my last name legally. Not to Daniel's, but to my own. It wasn't rebellion. It was rebirth. Every letter of that name felt like a declaration, I belong to me now. We moved into a small house near the coast, the kind with creaky floors and sunlight spilling across every room. Daniel went back to teaching, and I started my own small design business, the one my mother once told me would never go anywhere. 6 months later, my first collection sold out. One evening, as I was sketching by the window, my phone buzzed. A message from Rachel. We're still family, Maddie. Don't forget that. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I deleted the message. Because she was wrong. Family isn't something you inherit. It's something you earn. And for the first time, I finally understood what love should feel like: quiet, steady, honest. I looked at Daniel, smiling at me from across the room, and thought, they tried to destroy my beginning. But all they did was give me a stronger ending. Revenge isn't always fire and fury. Sometimes, it's calm. Controlled. It's the moment you walk away from the people who once made you doubt your worth, and realize they can't touch you anymore. I didn't destroy them. I didn't scream or beg. I just stopped needing their permission to exist. That's when I truly won. If you've ever been the peacekeeper, the quiet one, the good child who everyone took for granted, this is your reminder. Your power begins the second you stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. And if you believe in quiet revenge, the kind that rebuilds rather than ruins, subscribe to Revenge Echo. Because we don't chase chaos. We celebrate the calm after the storm.